Today's scripture reading comes from Deuteronomy 10, verses 12 through 20. And now, Israel, what does the Lord your God require of you, but to fear the Lord your God, to walk in all his ways, to love him, to serve the Lord your God with all your heart and with all your soul, and to keep the commandments and the statutes of the Lord, which I am commanding you today for your good. Behold, to the Lord your God belong heaven and the heaven of heavens, the earth with all that is in it. Yet the Lord set his heart in love on your fathers and chose their offspring after them, you above all peoples, as you are this day. Circumcise, therefore, the foreskin of your heart, and be no longer stubborn. For the Lord your God is God of gods and Lord of lords, the great, the mighty, the awesome God, who is not partial and takes no bribe. He executes justice for the fatherless and the widow, and loves the sojourner, giving him food and clothing. Love the sojourner, therefore, for you were sojourners in the land of Egypt. You shall fear the Lord your God. You shall serve him and hold fast to him. By his name you shall swear. The word of the Lord.
Thanks be to God. We're going to be in Micah chapter 6 this morning. I thought to myself as I was waking up, if ever there was a time to wear a t-shirt, it's when I have a t-shirt with the sermon scripture on it that is from one of our local ministry partners. So we're going to be in Micah chapter 6, and we're really dealing with someone who's asking one of the big questions in life here, and that is, am I enough? I heard a speech years ago from James Chong, the vice president of InterVarsity Christian Fellowship, about how each generation has its own core question that it looks for the answer to out in the world around it. And in many ways, how we end up using those questions and the answers we choose to judge our own role in the world, our own contribution to answer, am I enough? So my generation, the millennials, our question is, what is good or what is moral? And so we judge ourselves on whether or not we are good enough. We have different definitions and different things that we target, and everybody's different in different ways, but we judge ourselves based on, are we good enough? Gen X, their question was, what is authentic? They tended to judge themselves on whether they were real enough. Are we real enough with people? And we could go on and on with other generations and with different ways that those questions express themselves. But the bottom line is, we all have some area of our lives where we are asking, am I enough? We all have places where we're trying to convince others, and I think much more so ourselves, that we are. So this morning we're looking at a passage of Scripture that speaks to that deep-seated need within us to be enough. We're going to read just 3 verses this morning, but in those 3 verses, I think we're going to see how we try to be enough, what being enough actually looks like, and how we can be enough. So we're going to start by reading Micah 6, verses 6 through 7. The author says, "With what shall I come before the Lord and bow myself before God on high? Shall I come before him with burnt offerings, with calves a year old? Will the Lord be pleased with thousands of rams, with 10,000s of rivers of oil? Shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul?" And we'll pause there. These verses are such a clear and powerful image of someone who is really desperate to be enough. They are trying to pull off what I'll call this morning self-justification. They're trying to prove that they are enough. It can be a little bit hard to see it because of the cultural distance between us and what's going on in the Bible here. But because in the text we see lavish sacrifices. We see thousands of rams, rivers of oil. We need to know that these would have been viewed as nearly impossible kind of kingly gifts and sacrifices. Things that only the rarest few in history would be able to pull off. So if we were to translate this into maybe a more modern version of the same question, the author is asking, if I bring enough to God, if I do enough, so much that I am doing alone what it would take thousands of people normally to struggle to accomplish together, is that enough? Does that make me enough? Because of that cultural distance, so often when we read passages like this, we can either just kind of shuffle past it, or we can give ourselves a pass. We can say, hey, I'm not killing sheep and sacrificing them to God. I hope that's true of all of you. We're not doing that anymore. I'm not killing sheep and sacrificing them to God, so this doesn't apply to me. But au contraire, mon ami, and I know I butchered that pronunciation. I think this pattern in Scripture reveals a deep-seated tendency in us as human beings to try and justify ourselves through our possessions. Sometimes we do it through physical possessions like money, wealth, prosperity, but sometimes we do it through more metaphorical possessions like our skills, our talents, our gifts, our abilities. We say, because I am so good at this, I am enough. We try to buy ourselves control over our lives. As human beings, we're tempted to think, if I'm a good enough parent, my kids will turn all right and they'll live good, solid lives. If I follow the right rules with my money, I will be in control and disaster will not overtake me. If I do everything right professionally and I make all the right connections, my career will turn out how I want it to, and I'll always find it fulfilling and enlivening and not at all soul-draining or burdensome. If I eat the right stuff, inhale the right oils, exercise the right amount, and make the healthy decisions, then my body will work correctly and never have problems. When I thought about that one, I think about the character Chris Traeger in Parks and Recreation. He's this fitness freak. He's always, I'm running marathons, I'm biking, I'm doing triathlons, I'm controlling everything with my body and eating exactly the right things. And then as soon as he gets hit with a common cold, it's like someone threw a brick under a truck and he just flies off the road and goes crazy. Anyway, there's nothing wrong with trying to accomplish any of these things. There's nothing wrong with trying to be a good parent, follow wise principles for our money, live a healthy lifestyle, or seek excellence in meaningful work. The problem is that our broken human hearts almost never let us stop there. They never let us stop at, I'm going to do this good thing because it's a good thing. Dallas Willard once wrote that grace is not opposed to effort, it is opposed to earning. And this is the problem with our hearts and the way we tend to do good things in life. Our problem is not putting effort into our lives. For goodness sakes, I think sometimes our issue, at least my issue, is not putting enough effort into my life. It's getting swept along by cultural pressures and not questioning it. I mean, do I really want to spend as much time on this phone as I do? Or do I just let that happen to me? Our problem isn't being judicious with our decision making in life. The problem is that our sinful hearts tend to twist our effort into earning. They tend to make us move from, I'm going to do this because I think it's good, or because I want to honor God, or because I want to be wise with the gifts I've been given in life. And it turns it into, if I do this, God will give me what I want, and my life will go how I like it to. My life will be easier. God will value more. The people around me will tell me that I am enough, and that will help me believe it. And the thing is, it's never enough. It's never enough. Even if at first I get what I want out of that self-justification, eventually it's not going to endure. One of the best novels that I've read in the last couple of years is called Station 11. It's a book built around the idea of our human search for meaning and purpose. It follows a traveling orchestra in a post-apocalyptic world whose motto is, survival is not enough. And at one point in their travels, the main character is kind of meditating on, dwelling on this idea of the things we want, the things we desire out of life, our search for meaning. And she says, at first, we only want to be seen. But once we are seen, that's not enough anymore. And after that, we want to be remembered. She's talking about this idea that there's always something more. There's always a next thing that we want. When we're doing this self-justification, there's always going to be something more. If we're looking as human beings to be enough for ourselves, for the people around us, for the world, based on our possessions, whether literal or metaphorical, it's never going to be enough. And I think all of us at some point in life realize that. We might do it consciously, we might do it unconsciously, but we figure this out. We get it. And when we realize that we'll never be enough, that the things that I use to justify myself coming from within me are not adequate, the logical next step is that I need to start trying to justify myself by using the people around me. In some way, shape, or form, they're going to be the thing that step stools me to where I need to go. That's what we see happening at the end of verse 7. That second half where it says, shall I give my firstborn for my transgression, the fruit of my body for the sin of my soul? It's saying, should I use the people around me, in this case my children, should I use the people around me to give what I need to give, to be what I need to be enough? And again, we might say, John, we've got this. No child sacrifice. Always good to have one we can check off the list real quick there. That's a good application point. Thanks, John. But even skipping over the parallels with how our society sometimes talks about abortion or euthanasia, how ancient Near Eastern societies discuss child sacrifice, that's a talk for another day. We all have this impulse. We all have this impulse to try to show that we are good enough by using other people in one way, shape, or form. In the last 60 years, CEO salaries for Fortune 500 companies have gone from averaging what 20 times the typical worker made then to what 300 times the typical worker makes now. And when our society so often measures our worth by the number of zeros on a bank account, what is that other than trying harder and harder to say, I am good enough. I am more important. Look, I am more important than 300 other people. Look how important I am. Look what I have to offer. Let's go the other way. On the other hand, look at the recent success of a whole genre of TV show that lets us bask in the secondhand experiences of the ultra-wealthy while also typically portraying them as horrible human beings. It allows us to look and say, it encourages us to feel justified because you're better than them, despite not monetarily measuring up. For all of us, no matter our life situation, there is a root temptation here to cultivate a sense in our heart of at least I'm better than. At least I'm better than. We want to justify ourselves. We want to be enough. And when we realize that we can't make it happen in and of ourselves, there's something in us that says, well, at least you're better than. And that leads to this is our isms as humanity. This is racism, classism, sexism, whatever other ism it is that you want to throw out there that makes me say I am automatically better than other people because of this. This is what we're doing. Our heart is trying to say, no, you're okay. You're good. You are enough. Caitlin Scheiss wrote a book about kind of how this applies to the church in America and specifically to how we've been experiencing politics in the last 20 or 30 years. And she said there is a reason that biblical prophets so consistently connect idolatry and injustice because in the end, idols will always demand things of you that you can only give them by exploiting other people. When our heart says, I am not enough, in and of myself, and it starts going looking for reasons that I am enough, it's always going to say, use other people. So we're all asking, in one way, shape, or form, how can I be enough? Am I enough? And at its core, that's not a bad question. How we answer it tends to be pretty bad. We tend to mess that one up pretty good. But the question itself is valid. John Stott, the theologian John Stott, said human beings are not self-explanatory. They derive their meaning from outside of themselves, from God in whose image they are made. We are not autonomous individuals creating ourselves constantly by the decisions and choices we make. No, we are images, we are reflections, we are dependent beings. The Bible would tell us asking that question is not a bad thing. Realizing that you don't have it all together is not a bad thing. What's bad is what we then do with it. Thankfully, the Bible has a different solution to seeking an answer to this question. Our passage this morning opened with these two verses of kind of intro questions in order to make us say in our hearts, no, I can't do those things. Those aren't the right things to be enough in the eyes of God. So here is the way that we can. Let's look at verse 8. He has told you, O man, what is good. And what does the Lord require of you? But to do justice and to love mercy and to walk humbly with your God. So there are three clear things here this morning. And the first one is to do justice or act justly. There are a lot of definitions of justice out there in the world today, and there's too often, I think, been a tendency in the church to run away from the question of justice because we feel like it's been too politicized or that the word carries baggage with it. It's confusing, it's scary to tackle. But I really support the point that Christian political activist Justin Gaboni made when he said, "This generation will have a conception of justice, and it can come from the world, or it can come from the church. And that is just a choice we are going to have to make." So this morning, let's talk about justice. What is the Bible talking about here when it says that we are to do justice, to act justly? The word for justice here in Hebrew is mishpat. Mishpat. It's a big picture word. It's one of the 3 or 4 that we find scattered throughout the Old Testament that really pull in attributes of who God is and how He wants us to live. The big picture of the word includes the idea of judging things rightly. When you are acting justly, it means that you are seeing things clearly. You are making the right moral evaluations. And then it has an idea of action within it. You are making those right moral evaluations, and then you are using whatever power you have to do the right thing in those circumstances. So if we were going for a short definition of acting justly in the Bible, you could go with acting and judging in a morally upright way in all areas over which we have any power or influence. So anywhere we have power, anywhere we have influence, we are seeing things rightly. We are seeing things rightly through God's eyes, and then we are acting rightly wherever we have power. Justice, when we break it down, is really God's goodness and truth applied to my life and all of the areas of the world where I have power, authority, influence, etc. Justice is you saying, I'm going to run my company with love and care for my employees and not just a desire to squeeze as much out of them as I can. He's not going to like me name dropping him this morning, but my friend Dale goes to church here and has spent a lot of time doing this. And if you as a younger business owner or professional want to talk about what this looks like, I can give you his phone number. Justice is us as a church saying that we're going to budget not just for the people within our walls, but for the community around us. Since even before I got here, we've been slowly increasing every year the percentage of the funds that come into the church that we just send right back out to local missions partners, missionaries around the world, benevolence cases, etc., etc. Justice is us as individual Christians saying, I'm going to vote not primarily with an eye on what's best for myself, my tax bracket, the people who are most likely, but what I think and hope, knowing we're fallible, what I think and hope is the best for my community as a whole. Acting justly, doing justice, means loving our neighbors, the people around us, and acting on their behalf, doing as much good for and to them as we can in all of life. So if we want to be enough, one of the key elements is justice. Do we act justly? Do we do the right thing? It's acting in this manner in all that we do. We're already seeing an interesting shift happening here, where our natural human desire is to justify ourselves with our possessions, with things that we have, whether that's an innate trait within us or a possession or whatever it is. But the Bible's shifting away from that here and towards the realm of actions and choices. I think Dr. King's famous desire to live in a world where his children would be judged by the content of their character rather than by the color of their skin is a reflection of this idea of biblical justice. The Bible urges us not to justify ourselves by anything that we possess, but to instead seek justice in how we act. And then we find a second command. So we're to do justice, act justly, and then we are to love mercy. This balance between justice and mercy is critical. I've mentioned an author before named Daniel Nairi. He wrote what I think is one of the best works of Christian fiction in the last 20 plus years. And in it, at one point, he starts reflecting. And he reflects on the ways we think about God around the world. He says, there are gods all over the world who just want you to express yourself, to look inside and find whatever you think you are, and that's all it takes to be good. And there are gods who are so alien to us, with minds so clear and power so great that the only thing to do would be to sit at their feet and wait for them to speak, to tell us what is good, to dictate to us all the answers of life. A God who listens is love, and a God who speaks is law. At their worst, the people who want a God who listens are self-centered. They want to live in the land of do as you please. And the ones who want a God who speaks are cruel. They want laws and justice that will crush everything that isn't them. He goes on to say, I don't have an answer for this. I think this is the kind of thing you live your whole life thinking about, that love is empty without justice, and justice is cruel without love. He's talking about this balance. He's talking about that there is something wrong with either of these concepts separated from each other, with justice separated from mercy, or with mercy separated from justice. We see this throughout the Bible. There's a reason that it tells us over and over, God is a God of justice and of mercy. I find myself compelled by this language in Micah 6, the way it expresses this. I love it so much because Micah could have said, you are to practice mercy, and he would be right. He could have said, you are to pursue mercy, and he would have been right. He could have said that you are to act mercifully, and he would have been right. But instead he says that you are to love mercy, treasure it, value it, celebrate it, love it. He's creating this balance with mercy and justice not only in the concepts themselves, but also in their outworking. So you've got mercy, hesed. It's another one of those big concepts in the Old Testament that comes up over and over again. It's often used for God's graciousness and compassion towards us as human beings. So we're supposed to show mercy the way God shows mercy, but we're also supposed to show justice the way God sees justice. And the way they talk about them here in the passage, justice, acting justice, doing justice, it puts the emphasis on action, on getting something done. But then mercy, loving mercy, puts the emphasis on the heart, the attitude, the motive behind our actions. When we're looking through the Bible, we find out that we can mess up in all sorts of amazing and wonderful ways. We can mess up by doing the wrong thing. I can go up and kick a puppy. I can go around and steal money from other people. I can do those like obviously morally wrong things, and I can mess up that way. But I can also mess up by going and doing that community service and making sure the person's there to take the picture of me. I can mess up by doing the right thing for the wrong motives. See, if there are times where something that seems like mercy in life can really be cowardice, because we just don't want to do the work and do the hard things that justice requires. But there are also times in life where someone can make it look like they're pursuing justice, and it's really vengeance that interests them. They just want to punish somebody else for the hurt that they've experienced. It's when we pair those two things together, justice and mercy, action and attitude, that it forces us to see how sharp a knife's edge we are walking on in these two things. How difficult to balance. In fact, as I'm thinking through these two things, it almost seems contradictory. Because both of these are big concepts, but if justice is much more than, it is certainly not less than, people getting what they deserve. Like, justice is, I get what I deserve. And mercy is a lot of things, it's a big thing, but it's certainly not less than, sometimes I don't get what I deserve. Sometimes I get better. I deserve hate and I get love. I get grace where I deserved condemnation, forgiveness where I deserved vengeance. So how can both of these things be true at once? That question prepares us beautifully for that last line, that we are to walk humbly with our God. To walk humbly with our God. I think this really points to the vastness of the call that was just placed on us when we were told to act justly and love mercy. It is so vast, so overwhelming, it is so unobtainable for us as humans to walk that knife's edge that if those were the only two things in the passage, if it ended on, hey, you know what you're supposed to do, act justly perfectly, so be perfect in your actions, and love mercy personally, be perfect in your motivations, in your heart, in your desires, then the answer would be there's no answer here. The answer would be maybe it's time for me to fall back into the despondency that we saw in those first couple verses. How am I supposed to do this? What am I supposed to bring to God? There's no answer. To weep and wail and say, how in the world am I supposed to pull that off? But for us as Christians, we should see where this is going. We should see where that knife's edge is pointing. When it says to walk humbly with our God, walking in the Old Testament was a metaphor. I don't know if you know this. This is bringing out the big guns on historical details. They didn't have cars 2,000 plus years ago. Ooh, where? So anything you did in life, you had to walk. You walked to it. So walking is, I am spending my life. My life is walking. So a lot of times in the Old Testament especially, when it talks about, and you walk in this way, it's saying, live your life that way. Spend your life. Do all of the things that you do in life that way. And so here it's saying, walk in humility. Live in humility. And you need to do that because you need to look at those last two commands and see you can't do it. You can't fulfill it. You can't be perfectly just. You can't be perfectly merciful. And that should create some pretty perfect humility in you. It should create a knowledge of your own inability. But as Christians, we know that we should be spurred to joy and praise in that humility. Because we should realize in it that there is someone who was able to be perfectly just and be perfectly lovingly merciful, who is able to look at us in the futility of our trying to be enough and to say, you are not enough, but I am. And because I love you, even though you are finite, even though you are weak, even though you are sinful and rebellious and have a tendency to try to make yourself enough and even to use others to make yourself enough, even in the face of all of that, I am going to satisfy justice by taking the consequences of your sin on myself, and I am going to show you mercy by holding out to you the offer of grace and forgiveness and salvation that I have earned by taking that justice upon me. Jesus said, I am going to free you from being enough because I am enough. He was perfectly honest that we weren't enough and said, I am going to love you and die for you anyway. I think this directive to walk humbly points us to the call as Christians to live our lives in light of Jesus' humility. He is the one who Scripture says humbled himself to the point of death, even death on a cross, so that he could act justly and love mercy. He could act justly in saying sin will be punished, and love mercy in saying, and I'm the one who will take that punishment so that you can find grace and you can find forgiveness and you can get better than you deserve. I think when we look at our lives as Christians, we see that our growth, the way we get closer to God, the way we become more like God, is typically seen, maybe more so than in any other way, in finding our identity, finding our enough, less and less in our possessions or skills or even actions, and finding it more and more in who God is and what He's done for us, because the reality is we don't have to be enough anymore. In fact, we can say, I'm never going to be enough, but at the same time, I am enough because He was. My enough isn't internal anymore. My being enough is not about me anymore. It's about Jesus, and what He's done is already complete. I don't have to make it better. I don't have to fulfill it. I don't have to say, it's done. And one last note this morning before we leave our text. We're to walk humbly with our God. While you're growing in this way, while you're figuring it out, you aren't alone. The God that we have been describing this morning, of justice and mercy, love and holiness, grace and truth, power and kindness, is yours. Not because you deserve it, because of who you are, or because you're better than other people, but because He loves you. We could never earn that love, not by anything we can bring, not by anything that we could be, not by being better than others, and yet we are loved and invited into a life of walking with our God. We are invited to a life where we can seek to act justly, to love mercy, and to walk humbly, and to know that as we're doing that, we are never, ever alone.